So, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had a very nice weekend. And now you are ready, and I hope you're ready for another discussion on strategy in the master budget. So, may I know, anyone, uh, do you have any idea about budgeting and the importance of budgeting in the management process? You can raise your hand if you would want to share before we formally start our discussion this afternoon. Okay, sige. So, thank you for that answer. For this afternoon, we will be having the following discussion outline. So, first, we will define and explain the purpose of the budget. Second would be to discuss the various types of budget, including the operating budget, capital budget, and cash budget. And third one would be to define the master budget and its components. And finally, we will discuss the ethical issues in budgeting. Okay? So to start, we have this definition of a budget. So a budget is a financial plan that outlines an organization's expected income and expenses over a specified period, usually a fiscal year, and it provides a roadmap for how the organization will allocate its resources to achieve its goals and objectives. By definition, I know that you already have an idea what a budget is, right? As a student, you're given an allowance every day by your parents. So you will budget it according to your needs. So if you will commute from your house to school, so you need to budget for transportation. Of course, you also need to budget for food, for photocopying, expenses, and other miscellaneous fees, right? So from the total allowance, no, kukunin nyo doon yung lahat ng kinakailangan yung paggastosan. So, similarly, yung sa corporation natin, we prepare a budget. So, basically, walang lalabas na pera from the corporation if hindi siya naka-budget at hindi siya na-approve na budget. Okay? So, that's how we know that we are not wasting the company's financial resources. So, lahat ng iyon ay kinakailangang may budget, may approval, at saka may mga justification. Okay? So, of course, for the budget, uh, there are various factors, no, in determining the budget for the year. One of the external factors typically include the technical, economic, political, regulatory, social, and environmental factors. If we have additional payment or additional expenses for the year that result from changes in the regulatory, no, yung meron tayong increase in compliance, we consider it in our budget. And also, with some of the internal factors, we look into matching our firm's strengths with our identified opportunities, resources, and threats that enables us to form a strategy in budgeting. Okay? So when we develop our strategy, we take into consideration what are our strategic goals, our long-term objectives, our long-term plans, because the long-term plans, from there, we can generate or we can uh, enumerate our capital budget. And then for our short-term objectives, we can have regenerate our operating expenses or operating budget, okay, which are all components of the master budget. So the management process of preparing the master budget. So for a budget to be effective, there needs to be an involvement of a lot of sections, departments, divisions, and also of the top management. So the top management ensures that budget guidelines are being followed through the budget review and approval process. And the active involvement by top management in reviewing and approving the proposed budget is an effective way to discourage lower level managers from playing budget games. No, when you add more, no, kala mo marami silang kinakailangan for the year pero hindi pala. They're just adding, no, adding konting mga figures, no? Ilang peso yun, pero malaki na din yun if you are going to consider it as a whole, no? So the budgeting processes usually include formation of a budget committee, the determination of the guidelines or the budget guidelines, from the preparation of the initial budget proposal, the budget negotiation, the review and approval, and finally on the budget revision. So in the organization for budget preparation, meron tayong tinatawag na budget committee. They are representative from different functional areas. Okay? So, hindi lang si finance yung gumagawa ng budget, but nag-aantay or naghahanap din siya ng tulong or naghumihingi din siya ng tulong from the different functional areas to think on what are the necessary expenses for the next year. Okay? So we also have the position of the controller that will serve as a head of the committee for two major reasons. First is that the controller's position is independent from the operating parts of the organization, so there is that independence. And of course, he has the skills and experiences in coping with the intricacies of setting up a budget. So, yung guidelines din naman natin, di ba, meron na tayong budget committee, tapos gagawa tayo ng guidelines. Yung guidelines din naman natin, it depends on yung mga pangyayari for the year, di ba? It could be like CPI, iba na yung CPI increase for last year, at saka yung current year, so magbabago siya. But basically, the general guidelines will remain the same, no? Take note that the starting point in developing the budget guidelines is the firm's strategy. No, we need to consider the things that have occurred since the adoption of the strategic plan, the general outlook of the economy and the market. Third is the goal of the organization for the budgeting period. Are we going to expand or hindi? Bababawasan ba natin yung empleyado natin or hindi? Meron ba tayong mga advertising na kinakailangan nating i-pursue for the year? Or what? And also, we consider the specific corporate policies such as mandates for downsizing, re-engineering, and the operating results of the year to date. Okay? By the way, class, as a general rule, no? As a general rule, before we proceed with the purpose, no? Okay, a moment. So as a general rule, the budget should be long enough to show the effect of managerial policies, but short enough so that estimates can be made with reasonable accuracy. Okay? So now we proceed on the purpose. Why do we have budget in the management process? For one, is to help, the purpose of the budget is, of course, to help organizations plan, coordinate, and control their financial activities effectively. It provides a framework for decision making and helps managers to align resources with the strategic goals and the objectives of the organization. Furthermore, it also serves as a means of communication, enabling managers to set targets and measure performance against those targets. So we have budget for the year versus the actual availment or the actual expenses for the year. So I hope that is clear. Kinakailangan may budget kasi kung walang budget, ano na lang yung gagamitin mong parang measure, no, na efficient ka ba, magaling ka bang gumamit ng financial resources mo, na-allocate mo ba yung ibang mga... Okay, sana tayo. So, kinakailangan ng budget to ensure that we have enough money for the year and that yung limited resource natin, yung financial resource natin na gagamit natin sa lahat ng mga kinakailangang gastusin for the whole year, no? Yung mga taxes and licenses natin, nabayaran ba natin, yung utilities natin, controlled ba yung mga expenses natin, kasi mahirap din naman kung after the end of the year, tsaka mo palang malalaman na, uy, kulang pala tayo ng pera, wala tayong pera, kinakailangan nating magpa-approve ng ganito, ng ganyan. So, the budget is very, very important, no? So now let's proceed with the different types of budget. So the first type of budget is the operating budget. So the operating budget is concerned with the day-to-day operations of the organization, including revenue and expenses related to sales, production, and other operating activities. The operating budget is typically the most detailed and comprehensive of all budgets and serves as a foundation for the other budget. So, isipin nyo na lang lahat ng mga income, no? Income for the year, tapos lahat ng operating expenses for the year, mula sa salaries, wages, and benefits of your people down to your miscellaneous expense, no? So, that's a very comprehensive budget, no? The second one is the capital budget. The capital budget concerns itself with the organization's long-term investments, including purchases of property, equipment, and other capital assets. It outlines the organization's planned capital expenditures over a specified period and helps to ensure that the organization has the necessary resources to fund these investments. So, capital asset. Okay? Capital asset, yung kinakailangan mo or gagamitin mo for a long period of time. It could be building, it could be lupa, it could be an improvement to building or improvement to land. So, depende. If it is also aligned with the corporate strategy. Ngayon mo na ba yan kinakailangan o hindi pa? Pwede mo ba yung ma-defer for next year? So, it would depend, no, on the need of the organization. The next one is the cash budget. So, in the cash budget, this budget is concerned with the organization's cash inflows and outflows, helping to forecast cash balances and ensure that the organization has adequate cash to meet its obligations. So here, in this budget, it outlines the expected cash receipts and disbursements, including the accounts receivable and accounts payable, and helps managers to plan for short-term financing needs. Okay. So, meron ka ng operating budget, alam mo na magkano yung kita mo for the year, alam mo na kung magkano yung expenses mo for the year. Next budget gagawin mo is the capital budget. Ano ba yung mga capital assets na kinakailangan bilhin for the year? And then, you have your cash budget. Doon mo malalaman kung may pera ka pa ba at the end of the year, magkano ba yung pera mo at the beginning of the year, meron ka pa bang magagamit, no, for those budget. You need to ensure na positive, no, yung end of the year na budget mo. Kasi kung hindi yun positive, negative siya, kinakailangan mo maghanap ng additional source of pera, no? Doon ka ba sa you need to increase your revenue or sales, or doon ka ba sa additional divisions, additional product lines para ma-boost yung cash receipts mo or yung sales mo, 'di ba? Mahirap din naman mag-budget na hindi din naman kaya, yung parang imposible naman na mangyari, no? So here we also have a slide on how budgets are used to monitor and control financial performance. So by regularly tracking and comparing the financial performance against the budget, managers can identify areas of variance and take corrective action to bring performance back in line with the expectations. And budgets help to control costs, no, manage cash flow, and ensure that the organization is on track to achieve its strategic goals and objectives. yung ginagawa natin is month to month, no? Yung budget mo for the month, kino-compare natin yan sa actual mo. Pag may variance, pag sabihing variance, may difference, magkaiba yung, may, yung difference nga, tinitingnan natin, is it a positive or a negative variance? And then, anong dahilan? No, you need to answer the question why. Why did it happen? Is there something that we can do? Meron ba tayong na-miss out? Meron bang control na hindi nagawa? Ano kaya yung kinakailangan natin gawin so that it will improve or the figures will improve for the next month? No? Kasi, ang tawag dun, domino effect kasi siya. Pag hindi natin i-correct or hindi tayo mag-intervene, no, gagawa ng mga actions to improve, at the end of the year, we will be looking at a lower income, 'di ba? And it would also send a signal to the management committee or to your board of directors na, uy, ano bang ginagawa nila? Baka may something wrong, no? Baka may something na hindi nagawa yung management to ensure na we follow or we achieve our strategic goals and objectives for the year. Okay? Sige. So, on the next slide, we have here the master budget. So, what is the master budget? So, a master budget is a comprehensive financial planning document that includes all the lower level budgets, such as the cash flow forecast, the budgeted financial statements, and the financial plans of the organization. It consists of many interrelated operating and financial budgets. Sabi nga, there is a need, no? Multifaceted siya, maraming mga section involved. So, hindi din siya basta-basta na magagawa mo lang for a day. Meron pa tayong tinatawag na initial budget proposal, negotiation, review and approval, bago siya dumating sa point na kinakailangan siyang pa-approve for approval, for board of directors approval. Okay? So, ulitin natin ha. What are the internal factors that would affect your initial budget? For one is, do you introduce a new product for the year? No, meron bang product development? Meron bang adoption of new manufacturing processes? Are there any availability of equipment or facilities? Magre-rent ba tayo? Lease, own, rent, and equipment, facilities? Meron bang changes sa product design natin or product mix? How about expectations? So, marami tayong angles na tinitingnan. The part of the external factors, we consider our competitors' actions, the changes in the labor market, no? Mahirap paghanap ng mga empleyadong competent, yung may skill, yung hindi mo na kinakailangang i-train, no, yung konti na lang supervision yung gagawin mo. So, of course, may price, no? May price na kaakibat doon. We also consider the availability of our raw materials or components and their prices and the industry's outlook for the near term. So, a master budget usually incorporates many elements which may include the budgets for sales, production, administration, direct materials, direct labor, and overhead. Okay. So, yon. Sales, mula sa sales, yung magkano yung projected sales natin, magkano yung production budget natin, yung operating expenses natin for the year, selling expenses, the cost of goods sold. So, marami, no? So, we need to break it down, no? Isa-isa. So, we will start with the sales budget. Ito talaga yung unang-una. The sales budget is an essential component of the master budget, and it provides a detailed estimate of the organization's anticipated sales revenue over a specified period. So here, you have the formula. The total sales is equal to expected sales volume multiplied by the sales price per unit. Okay? When we say expected sales volume class, we mean that the estimated quantity of goods or services that the organization expects to sell during the budget period. Okay? Yung budget period natin, pwede yung quarter, you divide it into 4 quarters or annual. So, depende sa presentation, no? And then the sales price per unit, ito, yung pinakasimple lang talaga class, yung assuming isa lang product, no, yung mga illustration na nilalagay natin dito, assuming isa lang yung product na kinakailangan mong ibenta. Kasi it would all be complicated na if we will have 2 or 3 or more products, no, to consider. So basic muna talaga tayo. So sales price per unit is the price at which the organization plans to sell each unit of goods or services. Okay, isipin niyo na lang na sari-sari store ito, ilan yung quantity multiplied by the price per unit. So that would be your total sales. Okay. Now, if you have the total sales, magkano naman yung expected cash receipts mo? Okay? When we say expected cash receipts formula, we refer it to that the product of the total sales and the percentage of cash sales. Okay. When we say percentage of cash sales, ito yung percentage ng sales revenue that the organization expects to receive in cash. Diba, class? Yung sa revenue natin, pwedeng babayaran ka in cash, pwede din uutangin, diba? So, when we compute for the expected cash receipts, we only consider those yung percentage na bayad in cash. Kasi yun lang din yung gagamitin natin for forecasting. Okay? So, cash receipts, take note, is equivalent to the product of total sales and the percentage of the cash sales. Okay, let's use it in an illustration. So, let's assume that an organization expects to sell 10,000 units of a product at a price of 50 peso per unit during the next quarter. So, you have the quantity, 10,000. You have the price, 50 pesos. Now, the expected total sales would be 500,000, which is the product of 10,000 units multiplied by 50 peso per unit. Now, to compute how much is our expected cash receipts, we just multiply the total sales by the percentage of cash sales. So that would be 500,000 multiplied by 80% or 400,000 pesos. So, very easy. Okay. Klaro ba yon? So, by using the formula, alam na natin magkano yung total sales, magkano yung cash sales. So, okay na tayo for the sales budget formula and the expected cash receipts formula. So, by using this formula, organizations can estimate their sales revenue and cash inflows accurately, which can help them to plan and manage their resources effectively. Okay, so if yun lang talaga yung quantity na you expect to sell for this quarter, of course, malalaman nga magkano kaya yung kikitain ko for this quarter. Kaya yun, kaya niyang iserve lahat ng mga expenses for this period. Okay? Kinakailangan ko ba mag-effort, no? Kinakailangan ko ba ng mag-live selling para magkaroon ng maraming income? 'Di ba? So that's very basic, no, on the sales budget formula. Do you have questions? Okay. So if you have questions, we'll just pause the video and then we will discuss your questions and answers. And if wala naman, we will continue with the video. Okay. So next one, no, component of the mastery budget is the production budget. Production budget is a critical component of a master budget, and it provides an estimate of the quantity of products that the organization needs to produce to meet the expected sales demand. Meron kang sales demand, of course, kinakailangan i-meet mo yung expected sales demand mo by the preparation of the production budget. Paano ka naman kikita kung in the first place wala ka namang na-produce, right? So, here, in this case, the direct materials and direct labor budgets are closely linked to the production budget as they provide estimates of the quantity of the raw materials, no, and the labor hours needed to manufacture the expected production output. So here is a formula to compute the production budget, the direct materials budget, and direct labor budget, including the computation of expected cash disbursements for purchases of materials and payment of direct labor. So, una would be on the required production units. So, di ba, meron kang expected sales volume yung previously, meron kang expected sales volume. Yung 10,000 unit, di ba? That was the expected sales volume plus the desired ending finished goods inventory less the beginning finished goods inventory. So, given yung beginning finished goods inventory, yung desired ending finished goods inventory class, it depends on what is given in the problem. Pwedeng sasabihin niya, yung desired ending finished goods inventory niya is a percentage of next month's sales. Okay? So, basahin yung nasa given, as nasa problem. Okay? So, desired ending finished goods inventory is the desired, anong tawag doon? It's the desired quantity of finished goods inventory that the organization wishes to have at the end of the budget period. Yung required production units naman natin, ito yung kinakailangan nating i-produce. Yung beginning natin, that refers to the finished goods inventory that the organization has at the beginning of the budget period. So, yan yung required production units natin. So, kinakailangan makuha mo yung required production units para makapag-proceed tayo sa next formula, no? Or next step to get the direct materials budget. Okay. How are you going to get the direct materials budget class? You just multiply the required production units by the raw material quantity per unit. Okay. Plus, or you add the desired ending raw material inventory and deduct the beginning raw material inventory to get the required raw materials. Don't worry because we will have an example or illustration later. Okay? Yung sa raw materials naman natin, class, of course, yung sa raw materials natin, quantity, the raw material quantity per unit, class, is the quantity of raw materials needed to produce 1 unit of the finished product. Yung desired ending raw material naman natin is the quantity that our organization wishes to have at the end of the budget period. Yung beginning natin, that is the quantity that we have at the beginning of the budget period. Okay? So, next formula that you need to familiarize with is the direct labor budget formula. So, in this formula, yung gagamitin mo pa din is the required production units multiplied by the direct labor hours per unit. Okay? Take note. Per unit. Ilang oras ba yung gugugulin mo para kumpleto mo or like makaproduce ka na isang unit ng item, no? So, let's say for example, yung isang unit, 2 oras, 3 oras, 5 oras, di ba? Multiplied by the direct labor rate per hour equals the direct labor cost. Okay. So, from there, di ba, meron tayong expected cash receipts, meron din tayong formula for the expected cash disbursements for purchases of materials. So, let's see. So, it's equivalent to the required raw materials multiplied by the raw material cost per unit multiplied percentage of cash purchases. So, similarly, dun sa estimated cash receipts natin, class, merong percentage na babayaran natin in cash. Kasi marami din tayong mga friends na supplier, mga kakilalang supplier na nagbibigay sa atin ng credit line. Credit line. You know, 30 days, 60 days. So, depende. You need to negotiate with your supplier, your partners in business, no? And then, we also have the expected cash disbursements for payment of direct labor formula. Ito naman, class, hindi mo naman pwedeng utangin, yung direct labor. Kailangan mong bayaran. So, you have direct labor cost multiplied by percentage of cash payments. Okay. Okay. I think that's clear. We have yung formula. 30 minutes to the class, marami ng formula kailangan nating i-familiarize. Okay. Don't worry because sabi ko nga, we have an illustrative problem after this one. Okay, let's use an example. Assume that a company manufactures a product called Widget X. Okay, Widget X. The company expects to sell 5,000 units of Widget X during the next quarter. The desired ending finished goods inventory is 1,000 units and the beginning finished goods inventory is 500 units. Guys, wag niyong confuse yung self nyo. May iba-iba, di ba, you know already, may iba-ibang inventory. You have the raw materials, meron kang yung work in progress, at saka yung finished goods. Yung pinag-uusapan natin dito is the finished goods inventory, 1,500. Ilagay nyo na sa papel. You also have an information regarding the raw material needed to manufacture 1 unit of widget X, which is 2 kilograms. So, kada isang unit, 2 kilogram. Okay, ng raw material. And the desired ending raw material inventory is 500 kilograms. So, kung 500 kilograms, ilang unit yon? 500, sige, calculator. 500 divided by 2, malamang 250. So, 250 units, no? Yung gusto niyang ending na raw material. While the beginning raw material inventory is 250 kilograms. Okay. So, the direct labor hours needed to produce 1 unit of widget X is 1 hour and the direct labor rate per hour is 20 pesos. So, ilagay na yan sa papel. Isang unit ng widget X, 2 kilogram ng raw materials, isang oras ng direct labor, at saka yung direct labor rate is 20 peso per hour. Okay? Now, there is an additional information. The percentage of raw material purchases expected to be paid in cash is 60%, while the percentage of direct labor costs expected to be paid in cash is 80%. Okay? So, 60% na lahat ng mga raw materials purchases, babayaran. 60%. Yung direct labor naman, na babayaran in cash is 80%. Okay. Now, in your arsenal, alam niyo na yung formula. So, we just, di ba? Ilagay lang natin siya sa tamang placing. So, to compute, magsisimula tayo for the required production units. So, the required production units is equivalent to the expected sales volume plus the desired ending finished goods inventory less the beginning finished goods inventory. And then you will get the required production units, which is 5,000 plus 1,000 less 500. So the required production units is 5,500. Okay, 6,000 minus 500. So that's 5,500. Next is we need to get the required raw material. So, the required raw materials, alam na natin yung formula. Mula sa required production units na 5,500, i-multiply siya sa raw material quantity per unit that is 2 kilograms. No? Multiplied by 2 kasi 2 kilograms per unit plus the desired ending raw material inventory less the beginning raw material inventory. Okay? Huwag nyong do not be confused, no, with the raw materials, with the finished goods. Ilahi gid siya. Okay? So, lahi ang ending, lahi ang raw material, lahi pod ang sa finished goods. Okay? When we compute the required production units, we consider the finished goods. When we compute the required raw materials, of course, we use details on raw materials. Okay? So, going back, so after we add the desired ending raw material inventory, we deduct the beginning raw material inventory, and then we will get the required raw materials. So 5,500, the required production units multiplied by 2 plus 500 less 250. So your required raw materials for the period is 11,250 kilograms. So, ilang unit na yon? 11,250 divided by 2. So, 5,625 units. Okay. Okay. Okay, so that's the required raw materials. Hindi pa tayo tapos. Nagsisimula pa lang tayo sa production budget. Okay. So next, we compute. Tapos na tayo sa raw materials. Alam na natin yung required number of units for production. We now compute the cash requirement, the direct labor budget. So for the direct labor cost, you have the required production units multiplied by direct labor hours per unit multiplied by direct labor rate per hour. You will get direct labor cost of 110,000. So 5,500 multiplied by 1 isang oras multiplied by 20 pesos, 20 pesos per hour. Okay? So, okay na tayo for the direct labor cost. Now, we proceed with our expected cash disbursements for purchases of materials. So, nilagay natin yung formula para hindi tayo malito. So, the required raw materials multiplied by the raw material cost per unit multiplied by percentage of cash purchases, wherein we assume the raw material cost per kilogram is 10 peso. Dapat 10 peso to class. Pasensya na. So, the expected cash disbursements for purchases of materials would then be 67,500 because we assume 60% lang yung babayaran natin in cash. Okay? Questions? Sige. So, next would be, we need to compute, tapos na tayo sa raw materials, di ba? Pagtapos na tayo sa materials, dun tayo sa direct labor. Okay. On the direct labor, we have the direct labor cost multiplied by percentage of cash payments, no? So that we can get the expected cash disbursements for payment of direct labor. So 110,000 multiplied by 80% expected cash disbursement for payment of direct labor. So that is 88,000 pesos. Yung sa materials, yung cash out natin, cash disbursement natin, 67,500. Yun namang sa direct labor, yung cash out natin is 88,000. Okay? Okay. So now we proceed with our manufacturing overhead budget. So, you know the component, di ba, ng total production cost. You have direct material, direct labor, and then yung manufacturing overhead. So, to continue, we have we assume that the manufacturing overhead for the production of widget X is 30,000 per quarter. The manufacturing overhead, take note, includes indirect materials, indirect labor, depreciation of factory equipment, and other related costs. So you have the expected cash disbursements for manufacturing overhead as follows. So you have 4,000 plus 6,000, 10,000 plus 10,000, 20 plus 10, that is 30,000. So the total manufacturing overhead. How about yung cash disbursements natin dito? We expect na 50% lang yung cash disbursements natin for manufacturing overhead. Kaya we have yung per quarter ba to? For the period, 30,000, per quarter to. 30,000 multiplied by 50%, we will get 15,000 pesos. Okay. Okay. So, meron na tayong direct materials, direct labor, manufacturing overhead, budget. Now, let's continue with the selling and administrative expense budget. By the way, class, by using the budgets, yung sa direct materials, direct labor, manufacturing overhead, we can also use this information to help us allocate our resources effectively and ensure that we can meet our financial obligations on time. So aside from the manufacturing overhead, we also have selling and administrative expense budget. So as with the overhead cost, marketing and administrative expenses are also made up of fixed and marketing variable components. Pero here in our example, pinasimple because we just write down that we assume that the selling and administrative expenses for the quarter are 20,000 pesos, which includes salaries of 8,000, rent for 3,000, utilities of 2,000, advertising of 5,000, and then other cost of 2,000. So for a total of tumataginting na 20,000 pesos. Okay. And then, eto na naman tayo, we estimate na naman magkano ba yung babayaran natin in cash. So here, we estimate that ilang percent? 70% is expected to be disbursed for selling and administrative expenses. So you have 20,000 multiplied by 70%, you will get 14,000 pesos. Okay? Okay. So now, we have the cash budget. No? We are already done with our sales budget, with our production budget. Now, we'll proceed with the preparation of the cash budget. And assume the following information available for the quarter. So, yung cash budget natin, class, cash receipts, cash disbursements. Okay? Cash receipts, I repeat, cash receipts and then cash disbursements. Okay. For the cash receipts, normally the bulk of a firm's cash receipts comes from the customers. And that the possibility, of course, of cash from other sources such as merong additional investment, may benta ng asset, may utang, no, should likewise be considered when cash receipts are being budgeted. So for cash disbursements, we also need to consider some various adjustments and additions that will have to be made when preparing the budget for prepayments. So using this information here, we have beginning cash balance of 5,000 pesos, expected sales revenue of 100,000 pesos. Everything here is in peso ha. Expected cash collections of 80,000. And then we have here expected cash disbursements for direct materials of 25,000, direct labor of 20,000, manufacturing overhead of 15,000, selling and administrative expenses of 14,000, identified capital expenditures of 5,000, and income taxes of 10,000. Okay? I think I have yung isa yung sa income statement parang I've changed the figures. But for this budget, 10,000 yung income tax. Baka malito kayo yung sa kabila, yung 6,500 lang ata yung income tax na nilagay ko doon. Okay, to prepare for the cash budget for the year, we have the beginning cash balance of 5,000. You add cash collections of 80, so you have total cash receipts of 85,000. For the cash disbursements, ito yung iba galing sa previous problem natin. What we just added the capital expenditures and the income taxes. So you will have a net cash flow of negative 4,000. So, kulang ka. No? So, ano yung gagawin mo kung kulang? So, mag-a-adjust ka ngayon. No? Mag-a-adjust ka. But it would depend. Kasi baka gusto mo mag-adjust hindi sa production side mo, but in your cash collections or lagay ka ng additional sources of cash. Additional sources of cash. So, anong ba ulit yung mga additional sources of cash? You have additional investment, sales of assets, borrowings. Okay? Sige. We proceed with the preparation of our budgeted income statement. Tapos tayo sa cash flow, punta tayo sa income statement. So after the cash budget has been completed, we prepare a budgeted income statement showing the net income that is to be expected during the budget period. No? Ito pala, yung iniba ko, yung tax niya naging 6,500 here. So parang isipin niyo lang, different siyang problem. Pero supposedly, dapat same siya. Para hindi tayo malito. So, parang may continuity. Okay? But this is the this is the template of the budgeted statement. You will start the computation from the sales revenue less your cost of goods sold to get your gross profit. And in this case, you have sales revenue of 100,000 peso. The total cost of goods sold is 60,000. So, saan galing 60,000? 25 plus 20, 45 plus 15. So, that's 60,000. less operating expenses and selling and administrative expenses of 14,000, and you will get income before taxes of 26,000, less income taxes of 6,500 to get net income of 19,500. No? Okay, so supposedly yung ginawa ko dito, dinisame ko na lang, sana I'll just retain the income taxes, no? Para pwede tayo makagawa ng budgeted financial position. Sige lang, no problem. So, yan yung flow ng preparation. Okay. Okay, so we're done with the master budget. You have sales budget, production budget, manufacturing overhead, yung selling, yung cash budget, yung income statement budget na forecast na din natin. Now, let's see on different alternative approaches in budgeting. Okay? So, alternative approaches in budgeting, we have the first one that we will discuss is the zero-based budgeting or the ZBB. Ano ba to? Ano nga ba ito? Okay. Okay. Sige. Okay. So, in zero-based budgeting, it's an approach to budgeting that requires each budget line item to be justified from scratch rather than just being a continuation of the previous budget period. No? This process assumes that most, if not all, current activities and functions will continue into the budget period. Magsugod siya sa zero. So here, it requires managers or budgeting teams to perform in-depth reviews and analysis of all the budget items. No? Such a budgeting process encourages managers to be aware of activities or functions that have outlived their usefulness or have been a waste of resources. Okay, zero-based budgeting. This approach, take note, take note, take note. This aims to reduce waste and increase efficiency by eliminating unnecessary or ineffective activities. Tingnan nito class, budget line item. Isa-isa talaga. Okay? So, if you have zero-based budgeting, we also have another one, the activity-based budgeting. Here, in this approach, it focuses on the activities necessary to produce goods or services rather than on cost centers. So here, ABB starts with the budgeted output and segregates costs required for the budgeted output into homogeneous activity cost pools such as unit, pwedeng batch, product sustaining activity cost pools based on similarity of their resources, and activity consumption cost drivers. I think you're very familiar with this if you're done with cost accounting. No? Maraming computation ng activity-based costing doon. No? Yung budgeting similar lang din. No? Parang, ano ba, ano ba yung cost driver niya? Okay, ano ba yung activity cost pool niya? So that's activity-based budgeting. Very, very applicable this one to manufacturing. No? Next one approach, the last one that we are going to discuss is the Kaizen budgeting or the continuous improvement, wherein it focuses on continuous improvement of processes and activities. So, what does it look like? A firm using Kaizen budgeting prepares budgets based on the desired future operating processes for the budget period. So this is an improvement over the current operating processes rather than the continuation of the current practices as is often the case in traditional budgeting. So it will be noted that in continuous improvement class, it has become a common practice for firms operating in today's globally competitive environment. So here, in Kaizen budgeting, it begins with analyzing practices, no? To identify areas for improvement and determine expected changes needed to attain the desired improvements. Okay. So, I think, klaro na tayo dun, di ba? Okay. So, now we are into the last slide. no, of Chapter 5 on strategy and master budget. So I hope meron kayong na-learn, no, from the various types of budget, ano yung purpose niya, kasi doon na tayo tutungo sa ethical issues in budgeting. Okay. And by the way, class, I would want to remind you na we just have this recording para naman when you would want to review your notes, you would want to study ulit, you will be reminded na ito pala yung kinakailangan gawin, ito pala yung formula na gagamitin, so hindi kayo mawawala when you solve the problems, yung chapter, end of the chapter problems and exercises. Okay. So, budgeting is a crucial part of financial management for any organization, and it has significant ethical implications that must be considered. So, here are some of the ethical issues in budgeting. So, for one, you have manipulation of financial data, no? So, ito, managers may intentionally manipulate data to present a more favorable financial picture of the organization to stakeholders. They can, provide budget na malakihan lang yung budget, tapos konti lang talaga yung actual availment nila. So, parang makikita mo, uy, magaling siyang mag-handle ng financial resources niya. No? So, this manipulation can lead to false reporting, misrepresentation of financial information, and ultimately, legal repercussions. Pero parang namang you're just fooling yourself, no? Gagawa ka ng report, tapos ikaw din naman yung magte-think, tama ba to? Hindi ba to tama? Tapos, ano ba yung impact nun sa akin? So, kapati mong iisipin kung ano yung bang in-adjust ko, no? So, other than that, for manipulation of financial data, we also have allocation of resources. Here, managers must ensure that resources are allocated fairly and equitably to all departments or programs. No, hindi pwedeng yung favorite mo lang yung mga may mga review center, no? Kung ano na lang yung hihingi nila, bibigay mo din, no? You need to consider also the needs of the other departments. Because unequal distribution of resources can result in the neglect of critical programs and departments which may have an impact, no, in the organization's ability to achieve its strategic goals. Silang lahat ay importante. Bigyan mo sila ng atensyon din. Okay? So, ethical decision making is also an essential aspect of budgeting. Managers must ensure that their decisions are consistent with ethical principles and values such as honesty, fairness, and transparency. This is especially important when making decisions that may impact stakeholders such as employees, customers, or suppliers. Okay, so next is on the decision making. Tama na ba? Tapos na tayo sa decision making na? Okay. Pasensya na. I was confused. So next is the on accountability. So budgeting requires accountability, and managers must be accountable for the decisions they make. So of course, this includes being transparent about financial data and being willing to accept responsibility for budgetary outcomes. No? Failure to be accountable can lead to mistrust among stakeholders and damage to organizations' reputation. But take note, even if we fail, we commit a mistake, we need to know the root cause, no? Saan ba? Ano bang nangyari? Saan ako nagkamali? So, we can rise above it naman, di ba? We are trained naman to not give up, no? Maybe it's your first year, hindi mo pa alam kung anong gagawin mo, saan ba yung kinakailangan mong i-adjust, saan ba yung titingnan mo, but you learn, di ba? You learn from it, and you need to be accountable about it. Be willing to accept responsibility for budgetary outcomes and learn from these events. Okay? And then we also have conflicts of interest, no? Here in conflicts of interest, ano